All right. Well, hey, Steve. How's it going? How are you?
Doing good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm pumped to talk to you because I'm genuinely like a big fan. And one of my favorite things about running a podcast like this and making online media has been interacting with people that I really like and enjoy their art and stuff. And so I tried to think of like an excuse to chat with you recently. And I was like, what's a reason that I could actually get Steve on the call again and chat with him? And I was like, oh, 5 by 5 released like 10 years ago. That's a perfect, and I want to talk to him about the album. And it's hard to bring up old material when it's 10 years old. And I was like, this is the perfect opportunity. And so I wanted to bring you on here. But for those who don't know who you are and are maybe listening to this for the first time and don't know who Wolves at the Gate is, can you just give like a quick intro of who you are and what you do and what you're about?
Um, I'm Steve. I sing and play guitar in Wolves at the Gate. We make aggressive rock music or metalcore or metal, or it's really eye of the beholder. So we've
Yeah.
been called everything under the sun. We don't know what we are. We just make music we make, and people can call it what they like.
Mm-hmm.
And Yeah, we make songs to help people understand the gospel message. We make songs to help people um, understand that there is true hope in the gospel. Um, and because we live in a world where Christianity has been, is not really a great word, but in America, in our culture in particular, Christianity has just become a bit of a joke or a meme. And I believe the true church is being overshadowed by um, a lot of fakes and phonies and counterfeits and cheap impressions of what the true church is and
Mm.
what Christ is actually like. And so, which is a perfect introduction to 5 by 5 because that's what the
Yeah.
beginning of the record's about.
Yeah. Well, and you guys had recently released an album full of covers, which was really interesting
Mm-hmm.
for you guys to do because you guys have done covers on albums before, but I just want to
Mm-hmm.
plug that for you so that for people who are like maybe wanting to dive into stuff and it's like, hey, they just released an album just recently with a bunch of cover songs of things you might know, and they're really well done. Like some of the songs, I'm like, I actually prefer this to like your version of Attack. I'm like, I like it more than the actual version of Attack, and I think it's better. And so I actually think it's really good. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here, yeah, like you said, for 5 by 5. And this album is really interesting, and it's right before I started listening to music, and because you guys were releasing Types of Shadows right around the time that I started listening to you guys, and so I really know this album well. Where it's kind of the album where I was like, oh, this music's really interesting, and I feel the same way as you do when it comes to Christianity and how it's represented. And I think that's why your music hits for me. I joke with my wife that I think for me, like I would rather sing your guys' songs. And for me, it's actually like more worshipful for me than what typical worship music is. And it really resonates. And for her, it's like, I don't understand that at all. It's like, that's fine. You just don't, it's okay.
Yeah, yeah,
But
it's just different flavors.
different
That's the
flavors.
beauty. That's the beauty of the church. Is yeah, there's rap music. There's your stock standard 4 chord worship music and hymns and
Yeah.
rock music. Yeah, I just love to see more of that happen in the church.
Yeah. Same. And for this album, I mean, 2014 doesn't feel like that long ago, but in a similar way, it also does. Like when I think about it, it's like, oh yeah, I was still in high school. Like I was just about to graduate when this album was dropping. And so for you, because I know even in running a podcast like this, it's interesting because you grow and develop as a person and you make stuff that people listen to and you grow and develop. And so sometimes you look back on something you've done and you're like, oh, I like see it differently now than when I was first making that thing. And so when you look back on this album, in the hindsight of 10 years, what for you is different looking back on it? Maybe what are some of the things that hit differently for you when you think about this record as compared to maybe when you guys were recording it for the first time?
Um, so at that point in my life, um, I feel like I really started to like get a strong grip on what I wanted to be about
Mm,
as a person. Um, I in up until the creation of Captors, um, I knew that I wanted to find a way to communicate um, the gospel to people with our music. But I think I was realizing I wasn't really sure how to do that, or
Yeah.
didn't have like a clear line of sight of a way to communicate that. And I think with 5x5, I really felt like I started to have some clarity. We had already toured the country for 2 years or 3 years at that point, which made a big difference because I was interacting with people all the time. And that was probably, touring's been one of the most helpful things for me to learn how to be a better communicator. Um, and and so I think that's definitely one of the things. I was learning how to be a better communicator, and I was also learning um, more about how to communicate this message in a way
Mm.
that was, I guess, simpler.
Yeah.
Um, so.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. And I think looking back on this album too, that it's kind of unique where it does a lot of things that your other records don't do. And one of the most
Mhm.
obvious ones is there's like clips of preaching and lots of actual, because you guys quote scripture in like different ways throughout your other
Mhm.
records, but in this one really particular, you like take time to like literally quote scripture often, and you have preaching. And this record kicks off with preaching from both a guy who I think is someone you personally know who's a
Mhm.
preacher, and then a clip from John Piper. And then
Mhm.
you essentially dive into the song. I feel like telling the church or whoever is listening to like wake up. And then you roll
Mhm.
into this other song of Dust to Dust that essentially talks about the idea of how we are dust and we return back to dust. And you say, oh, how lost I would be if my faith unwound, if I gained the world. And so for you guys in starting that record and trying to sort out your message and being like, this is actually how I think I'm figuring out how to present this, what made you want to start this off in that way? Because it's pretty unique from anything else you guys have done. I can't really think of a record where you've started it off that way, and also really intense where it's like wake up and you're dust, where it's like you're hitting us immediately, trying to get a message across. So what made you guys want to start it like that?
As I was working on the album, I just started realizing, kind of as the case is for almost all of our albums, I start realizing there's like a thread or theme
Mm,
in the lyrics. And, for me, I was feeling um, like with the songs, I was just kind of hearing this idea of like a radio transmission.
yeah.
And that's why the album's called 5x5, which is it's radio terminology. Just basically it's the same as saying loud and clear. Um, and and so that's where the idea then came to. It's like, it'd be awesome if we throughout the album had these things that felt like radio transmissions of
Mm,
communicating a clear message. And that's why you see one at the beginning, in the middle, and the end of the album.
yeah.
And and so um yeah, as for those two songs, the way that I saw it was, uh, we wanted to start the album with something very clear and, like, I guess, striking, content wise, with the actual like 5x5 track. And then
Mm,
I knew I wanted to start the album with "Wake Up," um, because I think as Christians we always tend to think that everybody else is the problem and not us.
yeah.
And for me, I wanted there to be an introspective sort of look, because what I realized in putting out Captors is that um, my my goal had always been to reach those that don't know Christ, and to help them
Hmm.
understand this beautiful thing that I've seen, and I want to share it with others. And I realized after Captors, it's like, oh man, a lot of things I was saying, I felt like I was preaching to the choir. And then I
Mm,
realized, okay, the choir's listening. And from touring, I realized a lot of people, they would talk about how much they appreciate our music and say like, yeah, the world really needs this. The world is messed up. I'm like, dude, you really need this. I really need this. We
yeah.
really need this.
Yeah.
Everybody needs this. This is not like you're great and these other people are not great.
Mm,
Um, seeing the gospel should not cause us to be judgmental or look at others with condemnation. It should cause us to be broken, and to recognize the great grace that's been shown to us. And so, to me, yeah, that's why I wanted to write the song "Wake Up." Is like, okay, so if you've seen this great gospel, what is it causing you to do? Is it
Yeah.
causing you to make other people feel like they're not welcome, or to make them feel like they're like some like sick case and they can't be helped? It's like, that's exactly what the gospel's for. It's like Christ said it. He's like, I didn't come for those who are well, but those who are sick. I have not come for the righteous. I've come for the unrighteous.
Mm-hmm.
But we act like we're righteous, and the only reason why I have righteousness is because of Christ. It's his righteousness, not mine. I'm united with him. That's why God sees me that way, but not because I live my life perfectly. We need to be identified as receivers of grace, not those who don't need it.
Yeah.
Who do the heavens rejoice over? They rejoice over, the one who needs repentance, as opposed to the 99 who don't. And so, I really wanted that song to be a wake up call to, I guess I realized there was a choir of believers who were listening to our music, and just from touring, I got this notion of like, yeah, you need to get out there and like help those like messed up people. And it's like, you might need to change that perspective a bit. And that may be why they don't want to hear the message, because that's the mentality we've adopted. And then with Dust to Dust, the only reason why we act that way is because we don't realize the great grace that's been given to us. And for me, what Christ has done for me in the gospel is the most precious thing that I have in my life. I love my wife dearly. She's my best friend. I love my children. I sincerely, I do. But Christ and his work on the cross for me is the most precious thing that I do have in my life. And I wanted to call the listeners to wake up and see that, and to see that everything that we have of value is hidden in this beautiful work. And it's a side of seeing that causes us then to respond rightly, I guess, to whether it is interacting with other people or what have you. I mean, a long list of things could be talked about from that, but so that's kind of was the heart behind the beginning of the album.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's really cool. I feel like that's why the record really resonates with me. And even the lyrics are just like, oh, man. Because like you said, you were figuring out your message and like, how do I communicate this to people? But then even in Wake Up, too, you talking about like, hey, like the wolves are clawing and snatching up the sheep. Like, what are we doing? And then you're like, oh, man, he's got a point. And you go into this song, Return, which I don't know how popular the song was on the album, but for me, it's one of my favorites on it. It's got this really cool guitar part that's kind of in the middle of the song. That's just there for like one verse. I'm like, this is so sick. It is so cool and like well done. But the message of the song, I find convicting, of being like, hey, like you need to come back to God and like what this whole thing is about. And so for you, it sounds like there was a lot going on for you guys as you were writing this, and like that kind of theme. It's even interesting to think like you guys, I assume, probably write songs and then you start to be like, oh, I actually see maybe what's going on here, and like form an album out of it. And so for the song Return, what inspired that one for you? And yeah, what made you want to write that one? And it kind of seems like there's a theme, especially in the first like couple songs strung together, where you're like trying to send a message to the listener, be like, hey, it's time to get this stuff figured out.
That song is a bit of a dark horse on the album. And yeah, but I love yeah, I love yeah, the music, and um the message of the song came from I just we were on tour, and I was just reading my Bible, and um I was just kind of floored by, in I think it's in Jeremiah 2 or 3, but I just saw the word return,
Hmm.
and I realized I'm like, I it was just, it floored me, honestly. Why would God, like, God doesn't need anything.
Yeah.
Why is he telling us to return? Like, and who is he calling to return? A bunch of faithless people.
Hmm.
We really don't offer him anything that he needs, you
Yeah.
know. It's not like we're going to return and be like these like really faithful worshipers who are doing it like fulfilling his law or upholding his law or acting really in any way that would glorify him in the way that he deserves. But it's out of the this merciful and compassionate nature of who he is that it's like one of the kindest words in the Bible, I realized. And
Hmm.
I was just floored by that word return, and I was just, it honestly, like, it really, it broke me. um and I remember that's how I shared the gospel that day on tour, was just talking about the fact. I was like, why, you know God's calling us to return. We don't make much of that. We don't even realize how incredible that is, that he
Hmm.
would even say that, let alone, he doesn't just say return, he provides the way for us to return as well. So it's not even just the fact that his heart is inclined towards a people to come back to him, even though, you know, he's the offended party, and
Yeah.
he's calling the offender to come back to him and to receive mercy and love. And even though, as the offenders, we can't make our way back, he
Hmm.
provides that way. And so I just saw so much beauty in that, and I just wanted to find a way to write a song about that, which then leads into um, kind of relief, which gives a picture of, this is what this God is like.
Yeah.
Um, you can return.
Hmm.
These are the people who he invites to come. So yeah, that's kind of how that all worked together.
Just like the blind, stumbling in the darkness, can't find light. For the walking blackness, can't find hope. Living without justice, can't find peace. While the resurrection, just like the blind, can't find light, can't find hope, can't find peace. While the resurrection. As you're slipping down to the floor, while you're reaching and crying out for someone to just hear ourselves. As you're slipping down to the floor, while you're falling, you hear me shout, seek him while he may be found.
Yeah, it's such a major theme, even in scripture. I was doing this week a Bible study with a bunch of junior hires, and it was funny because we were going through Exodus, and we talked about how, I don't know, God saved them from Egypt, brought them out, all that crazy stuff, and then pretty much immediately they built the golden calf. And I was like, and the crazy thing is, because I asked them, I was like, where did they get the gold? And they're like, I don't know. And I was like, they got the gold from like what God gave them when they left Egypt. And then they took it all, made this calf and said, this is the God that saved us from Egypt. And they were all like, how is Israel so dumb that they just like turned and did this? And I was like, guys, this is us. We're Israel. And it's crazy to think, like you said next in that song Relief, that, man, if I was God in my, like, it would be a bad time for everybody, but like to see a group of people who just continually, you try to help out and they turn, and again, just to be able to have mercy on them is so incredibly gracious. Like his amount of mercy and forgiveness and actual genuine love for a people who, like you said, don't really offer him any, like he doesn't need us. And we often cause him grief, but that doesn't stop him from loving us and providing a way to save us and have us be changed and turn back. And so in that song Relief, it really brings to mind, I don't know if this was at all in your head in writing it, but for me, even Jesus calling people to say, hey, like you guys have a lot of burdens, come to me, like take my yoke instead. My burden's easy, my yoke is light. And in this, you even have the scripture from Hebrews 4:15 to 16, essentially saying that we actually, in Christianity, have a God who understands what it's like to be human, which is really unique and really interesting. And so for you, in writing this song and putting this song in this record, what inspired this song for you? And even for that Hebrews 4 verse, what made you want to put that in there and to really put this message? And this song was pretty big too, where it seemed to resonate with a lot of the people who were listening to this record at the time.
So the song was really, it was birthed from two places. One is, those two texts, like the Matthew text and the Hebrews text, were both ones that were really ministering to me, and just showing this picture of what God is like, and this loving and caring Father, somebody who can identify with our weaknesses and our struggle, and knows our weaknesses are how we're prone to sin and failure and brokenness, and he understands that and calls us to come to him so he could bear that burden. And that's not just, he's not just saying, let me be a shoulder to cry on. He's saying, I want to pay the debt of that burden. And so that was something that was just seeing that picture of God and him being like that was, God was working on me in that way, but also, on tour, we interact with so many different people, and a consistent thing I just kept seeing was people who struggle with depression and self-harm and suicidal thoughts. And it breaks me because, that it comes from intense pain and feeling of worthlessness and rejection and so many things. And all I just kept thinking about was, we do not have a God who's unable to sympathize with our weaknesses and our struggles, but one who's been tempted in every way yet without sin. Draw near to him. Draw near to this God who understands what it's like. He understands every bit of brokenness or struggle. He knows it, because he was tempted in every single way yet without sin. So that means he actually understands it far better than we ever do, because we've given into every bit of temptation. We've never, withheld to the point of shedding blood, as Paul says. And so, but there was one moment in particular where we were on tour in Germany, and I just went to get a cup of coffee, and the girl that was giving me the coffee at the cash register, when she reached to give me my change, her arm was just like littered with just scars. And that's where, like, that line, we've seen your scars like prison bars run down your skin, hides wounds within. That's, for me, I didn't, there's nothing, unfortunately, she doesn't know me, and I didn't know what to say in that moment, but there was so many things I wanted to say. And the hope was just to write a song that somebody like that would hear it and hear the hope that there is in the gospel for them to have peace and forgiveness, and to be comforted. That was really the hope. And it's not just for people who have visible scars, it's people who have invisible scars as well. We all do, none of us are any different than that girl, who struggled to cut herself, whatever it is for her, it's something different for me and for you and for other people. We all have the same sort of pain and brokenness, and really it's because we know we don't have peace with our God, and this world is awful.
Yeah.
It really is. If you think about it rationally, it is awful, and it's a wonder that not everyone is just incredibly depressed. And so the hope would be that we would see this brokenness, and this is not God's design, but God has made a way for us to be healed, through his love and through the gospel.
Well, it's a great message, and it's something, yeah, like you said, that I feel like everybody needs, that it doesn't always look the same for everybody, but everybody's going through something and has those kinds of scars and needs, and I think is hungry for that relief, even if they don't fully get what that means or what that looks like. That even for a lot of people who do cut too, a lot of times it's to try to find some form of relief, and it doesn't work. That you have to keep going back to it, and there's a God who's like, hey, I've been scarred for you, and like, it's once and for all, like Hebrews says, like we don't need to do it again. Like the sacrificial system is done, that I've paid the price once and for all, and then you can find relief and freedom in me, and I can take your pain and hurt and sin and actually pay for it. It's really cool. Another song that I think is one of the most unique songs you guys have written lyrically that's really, really cool and interesting is The Bird and the Snake, which I remember the first time I heard this song, I was like, wow, this is such an interesting picture of like sin and temptation and what giving into it is kind of like spiritually, where you tell the story about this bird and he's just kind of chilling and he needs to go somewhere, but he's kind of tired. And the snake's like, hey, like, you just give me a few feathers and I'll be able to deal with it and like help you out. And then as the story goes along, he gives him more and more feathers. And eventually I was like, well, the first time I heard the song that ended, I was like so upset. I was like, this is how it ends. I was like, this is not a positive ending. I was waiting for Jesus to show up or something. I was like, what? It ends with the bird dying because it's given away everything it has to the snake. And it's a really cool picture though. And so when you were writing that, what like inspired you to write a song like that? Because you guys have written some unique songs, but lyrically this is a pretty unique one compared to other stuff you've written, where telling a story like that isn't often in this particular way, the way you guys usually write lyrics. And so what kind of drew that out of you, and where did this whole idea of the bird and the snake come from?
I honestly, I don't know where the idea of the story came from. It's just something I kind of came up with, and I don't know. It's just one of those things of just inspiration. And for me, I started coming around to the idea of, I used to, in Captors, I realized I was trying to do too much in every single song. And I realized it's like, the hope is that we'll just continue to write lots of music, and I should just let certain songs just be one thing. And it's something that a theme I've tried to carry continually, is just allowing songs to just exist and be one thing. And that's what I wanted. I wanted The Bird and the Snake to be a song that did exactly what it did to you, which was, oh, I don't like this. It's supposed to create that feeling. It's supposed to make you think, I don't like how this ends. So then you should go back and think about what's the message of the song then. If you don't like the ending, what is it telling you? And really, to me, it's a cautionary song of the fact that I think a lot of people think, you can, it's kind of this concept of like, you think you can place your hand in the hand of sin or addiction or whatever vice, and you think that it'll just let go whenever you want it to. That's not how it works. And it's so that we would realize the frailty of our own flesh and our frame, and that it would cause us to flee to Christ and to go, I can't protect myself, protect me. Let God be your defender, not, and that, because I think that's the thing, is that I think a lot of people try to fight sin or depression through their own sort of, fleshly means. And that's the only result that will be produced, unfortunately, if we try to, fight, within our own strength. And so, yeah, it is probably one of the most unique songs we've written, and it's one of those songs that, like, I'm never going to try and write another one like that, because I just, I love the song. There's lots of songs that there are plenty of songs that I would go back and change things about, but that's one of those songs where, that was probably one of the first songs I felt like I did exactly what I was trying to do at that point in our career, which was really cool. And just just God helping me. That's all I can say. That's the beauty of writing music, is you don't know you're just kind of a conduit, of creation through the one who inspires you.
Yeah, it's really cool that you don't really know how the concept, like where it even came from, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I've got this idea. And even, like you talk about, because there's one point in the song on first listen, I was like, oh, this bird's going to figure it out. Where he's like, hey, wait a second. I don't think this snake has my best interest in mind. Like, I'm done with this. And then it's like, oh, it's too late. And then I was like, no.
There's lots of movies that are like that too. And I think part of it is probably just inspired from other literature and movies and concepts that I'd seen and heard before and just pieced together in my brain. Honestly, it just started from, I had this idea of writing a song about a bird and a snake. That's as simple as it started. And I wanted the song to end with the snake devouring the bird. That's like the infancy. And and I knew I wanted it to be like in 3/4 time signature, so it'd have a bit of a swing to it, so it'd feel like a storytelling type thing. And from there, it just kind of like cascaded and, you know, melded its way into what it became, which it ended up being one of the easiest songs to write, even though to me it's like what a song that I look back on and go like, I don't know if I could ever write something like that.
Yeah,
again,
well, that's really cool because it feels like a song that would not be easy to write, and so that's, man, super weird, super cool though.
Yeah, some of my favorite songs we've written have been so hard to write, and then it's so gratifying when it's done, and others have just been so easy and just as gratifying. You know, there's a little bit of, yeah, just art, you know, when things just come easily, or and there's like a really satisfying effect for that, and the opposite as well.
Others where you just have to like struggle, and then you're like, hey, look, it turned out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, well, of course, there's No Hope, because if you listen to the whole album, and two songs that really stand out that I want to talk about before you have to go. The first one is East to West, which is a really cool image, essentially drawing on the idea that what Jesus has done on the cross and in his resurrection is he's taken our sin, and it's as far from us now, if we are in Christ, as the East is from the West, which is like an infinite amount, which is really crazy and sometimes genuinely hard to believe. And even in it, you guys sing, living you love me, though I fought, dying you saved me, my soul bought, buried you carried my sins away, you carried my sins far away. And this one is one of those ones when I talk about like a worship song where I'll tell my wife, like, this to me is like, this is my worship music. And I was like, and it's songs like this that are like, man, the picture that you paint lyrically and the truth that you're able to talk about is really profound and cool and yeah, really, really deep. And so for you, with this song East to West, what does this song mean to you? Like, I know that obviously that's in there for a reason, but the whole concept of God taking our sin and having it be as far away from us now in Christ as the East is from the West, how has that hit you personally? What does that mean to you, and why did you want to write a song about that?
I mean, you kind of said a lot of the things that I would say, which is, it is probably one of the most like shocking truths inside of the gospel, which is, you know, there's two verses that that blow my mind, which is, you know, this psalm that talks about our sin being separated from us as far as the East is from the West, which means the East is never going to touch the West.
Yeah.
They are polar opposites. So that it, you know, the more you think about just literary wise, it's just so beautiful, such a beautiful concept. But that's just the literature aspect of it. The reality of it is even more beautiful. And another scripture that just always blows my mind is where it talks about how God remembers our sin no more because of what Christ has done. And all I can ever think is like, I remember all of my sin. Like I can't, and he's smarter than me. He has a much larger, you know, library of like brain capacity. It's infinite, you know, but that just shows how powerful the work is that Christ does, is that it's counted as no more. And so that's why the song starts with like, what's true joy? Like, it's knowing this truth. And that, you know, to me, is what makes it, you know, the gospel so beautiful, is this joy of knowing that the God who made me, who I rebelled against, is the same God who has reconciled me to himself and has given me this great gift of his love and mercy. And so, yeah, the music for the song was inspired by this band, As Cities Burn. You know, I wanted to write, especially like the intro. I honestly, like, if you listen to their first two albums, but in particular Come Now Sleep, I was really trying to kind of like replicate that sort of feel at the beginning of the song. And yeah, it's another one of those songs that, yeah, just I love how it turned out, and the musical aspect of it and the lyrical aspect as well.
Carry
favorites for sure. And I think, yeah, like you said, that concept, a lot of those verses, especially if you've been in the church a long time, can just become, I don't know, you're used to hearing it. But then to actually sit and think about it, it's like, this is actually crazy. Like what
Yeah.
God says has happened in Jesus is actually like, I don't always have the faith to fully believe it, where sometimes you like feel guilty and think like, man, God, because I know for a while, especially during the time of this album releasing 10 years ago, I really struggled with actually believing that God liked me, let alone loved me, because I was like, I know who I am. I know what I'm like. If I was God, I would be like, I'll tolerate you, but I won't really love you. But it's crazy to think of like how much God actually loves us and cares for us and what he's actually done to our sin. And like you said, like we remember our sin, but he doesn't. And not that he isn't like all knowing, but that he doesn't like hold it against us and isn't like, I bring this to memory every time I look at you. It's like he's actually forgotten it, which brings us to the kind of concluding song. The last song I want to talk to you about, The Father's Bargain, which again is, interestingly enough, a kind of another story song in a way that's really profound, I think. And it's essentially a conversation between the father and the son, talking about like, hey, this is what humans are like. Let's save them. And it's a really cool lyrical picture of Jesus and God, which I assume for you too is like a little bit scary to write something like that and be like, this is a little like I'm writing out of my league, but it's I find it really profound. And I think a lot of the truths that you have, where I've seen even people on YouTube like react to the song and be like, wow, this song is really incredible. And like the stuff that it's saying and the way that it's written musically is very powerful. And even when it gets to the point of essentially Jesus saying, hey, bring in all their sins and lay it on me, like I always get chills. I'm like, man, this is such a beautiful song because of what it portrays and the truth that it's portraying. And like to think about what Jesus did and how he saved us is really cool. But for you, what inspired this one for you? What made you want to write a song like this that's essentially a conversation in the Trinity, which is pretty crazy to write about? And how have you seen this song kind of affect people or even affect yourself since writing it?
So the song was inspired by, there's a short like excerpt from John Flavel, who he wrote a short excerpt, which is, he calls The Father's Bargain, and he calls it a proposed conversation.
That's really cool.
A proposed conversation between the Father and the Son. And you're right, like there is a lot of like danger in communicating this, because I didn't want to portray the story as the Father was angry and the Son and the Son is like gracious. There is a beauty in the harmony of God and his triune nature, and the Father sending the Son, and the Son being willing to go and to serve, and the Spirit's work and pointing to this work of the Son, and exalting it, and then obviously working in his people. But I just thought it was, it was a little hard for me at first, because I was like, I wasn't sure if it was actually like the right thing to do. But my hope was that people would understand like the artistic liberties. I was hoping people would perceive it as like, I wasn't trying to write a doctrinal statement, just trying to make art to help people understand the beauty of the gospel. And which is something that people forget a lot, is that everyone has like theological beliefs, whether you're an atheist or a theist or whatever. But when I'm making songs, I'm not writing theology. Like I'm not writing theological positions. I'm trying to make art that reflects my theology, what I believe, and to help people understand who God is and the gospel and things like that, and try to use it as tools in different ways. And 5 by 5, we were using songs as tools in a particular way, and The Father's Bargain was a part of that. Was how I read that and I was like, I got to figure out how to write a song about this and tell this sort of story. Because I just thought it was such an interesting vantage point because that's what you need to make art really, or music that's convincing, is you need interesting ways to look at, maybe because when everyone writes songs, like, okay, they write about pain. How many songs have been written about pain? But the vantage point is what makes it interesting and powerful. How many people write about heartbreak or love, and for me, we've been writing songs for like 15 years now, and trying to write about the same thing, just from different vantage points. And that's what's hard for me, is once The Father's Bargain was done, I was like, well, I can't write another one like that. I got to figure out other vantage points. But that one I love in particular, because I think it shows, my hope was that it would show the heart of God towards broken people like us, and his desire to save, and like the seriousness and weight of what Christ would go and endeavor to do, and that he did it willingly. That there are crazy verses in the Bible. Christ, fully knew what he was going to endeavor, but the cross is considered something that distressed him, how distressed he was until it was completed. He says, I have a baptism to undergo, and how distressed I am until it is completed. There was like a burden that he was carrying, but also it talks about the joy set before him. So he's this perfect being, going and doing something that caused great turmoil and distress in him for the good of someone else. And that's, to me, this perfect definition of love, is doing the greatest good for somebody else at the greatest cost of yourself, of the cost and expense of yourself. And I wanted that to be seen clearly in The Father's Bargain, is for the love of God to be seen so clearly. And like the end of the song, turn and look in the face of Jesus, the Savior who calls. Like, that's the hope, is that you would turn and look at his face and see beauty and see love, and go, I want to know this God. And thankfully the Lord's used that to minister to a lot of people. And I'm sure there's tons of stories that I'm forgetting, of people who it was pretty critical in their own understanding of the gospel, or whatever. But I'm grateful that that's out there for people to have, not because I think it's like some opus or something that's going to be lauded for years, but that, to me, I feel like it's a really clear picture of what the love of God looks like in Christ through the gospel, and hopefully that helps lots of people. So.
Sin, so I would be free. Bring in all
Totally. Yeah. And this whole album, I feel like, is a great example of that. And like you said, it was interesting where in some ways, I'm sure you've changed a lot. And in some ways you haven't. Where right before this, I kind of watched an interview because you guys did some behind the scenes stuff for this album 10 years ago where you showed and talked about some of the stuff you were working on. It was interesting to hear you now 10 years later and you 10 years ago, where you said in this interview talking about the songs and the songwriting process is that your goal is to not get bored of the gospel. And some people are like, oh, we've already talked about it. And you're like, actually, this is something that you can continually look at in different ways that are always amazing. And I genuinely feel like that's what every album from you guys, at least for me, feels like. Is like, man, how are Wolves at the Gate going to come at the gospel in a different way in this album? What are we going to experience? And it's really cool where I feel like you guys do that really well. And I think that passion for Jesus and message, because I know you're a person who like goes through normal things, but I don't think that this actually has died in you. We're like, it's cool to look back 10 years ago and you're still saying and passionate about the same things and being like, this is what I'm still about and the kind of music I want to produce and like be able to share with people. And it's really awesome. I'm thankful for it because I've been able to enjoy this album for 10 years and it's a great album. And for those who haven't heard it before, hopefully they go out and give it a listen. But I want to be generous to your time because you've been generous to me. And so just in conclusion, if people want to check out your stuff and what you guys are up to, where can they go? Where can they find what you guys are working on?
Yeah, people can go to Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, all that stuff. Yeah, we've got a lot of things in the works, which we're honestly, I can't wait to share. Yeah, I guess one thing in closing, I was just thinking about with what you were saying, about the gospel, and the gospel like isn't, to me, it isn't like a marketing tool that we've used for our music. This isn't like wasn't a phase of my life because I was following some teacher or preacher or organization.
Yeah.
It is the very thing it is the only thing that's given me any joy or comfort in my life, and not because it's some fairy tale. It's not because I've blindly followed some book or some ancient teachings. I've had to come face to face many times with, is this real? Is this true? How could this all be true? And the more that I ask those questions, the more that I just find answers that solidify and bolster my faith. And it's because I desperately need it, and while what we do, I do see as I want to evangelize. I want people to know the gospel, not because I want a crown in heaven. I want people to know this, it's when you understand the grace that's been shown to you, you want others. And I know I haven't earned it. And I know of the God who freely gives it. It's like when you get free stuff and you see your friends, you're like, yo, they're handing out free pizza over there. Like, you need to go get a slice. Like, you want to tell other people because you want them to enjoy this good thing that you got as well. And that's just how I feel about that. That's just the change that God has worked in me and continues to work in me. And the more that I see it, the more that I want to show it. And so I don't want people to ever think that your salvation in the gospel is either like just a phase of something you need to go through and then move on to other things. It is the source and the catalyst for every good work you may want to do, or source of catalyst, every sort of joy or anything. Everything leads to the cross and flows from the cross for the Christian. And so that's why our music is like that, because that's what is happening to me and in me. And Lord willing, we just continue to have ways to share that and express that. And we've had people in the past say, your song should be more Christian or this or that. And it's always comical for me. It's like, we've been making music for a long time, just trying to find different ways to communicate the same message over and over, and in different ways, and reach different people. And we're not always going to be perfect at that either, but we're sure going to try our best.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I appreciate about you so much. And I think genuinely, even though I've never met you via Zoom through the internet, I think that genuinely comes across that that's what you guys are actually about and what you care about. And it's not just a gimmick, that it is something you deeply care about and love. And so with that, I want to free you up. So Steve, thanks for coming on again. I love chatting with you, and I'm hoping that next time there's even like more new music, where I look forward to whatever you guys are doing next, and I'll get pumped about it and would love to have you back on, because I always enjoy chatting with you. So thanks for doing this, man.
Awesome. Thank you.